So today's scripture is from Job, the first chapter, verses 20 to 22. And you'll notice with the first sentence, it talks about tearing his robe. I always used to kind of wonder what that was. And that's a show of grief or loss. And they would tear their clothing to symbolize that. And so in chapter 1, verse 20, Job stood up and tore his gown in grief, and he shaved his head and fell to the ground to worship. He said, I came naked from my mother's womb, and I will be naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord. And all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God. May God add his blessings to the reading of his word.
Thank you. So, of course, we are in our year-long series entitled The Unfolding Story from Genesis to Revelation, because we understand that the Bible is one continuous story that connects all of humanity, generation to generation, and all of creation. So, as Greg said, we are in the book of Job, and I'm going to start off right at the beginning here. I'm not going to explain away what God did to Job. If you're looking for me to define it and explain it, I'm not going to do that. First of all, I'm not God, so I can't do that. And secondly, maybe it speaks to you in a different way. So I'd encourage you to actually read the book of Job and pray about it. So I've entitled this sermon, Coping with Evil. And I will also share that some consider this a parable or an allegory, and not necessarily a true story. I don't know. I'm going to treat it as a true story because I haven't gotten any information to treat it any other way. Now, if you don't know, I'm going to give you kind of a quick rundown. Job was considered a righteous man. He was a man who was a good guy. He trusted God. He was faithful to God. And Job was very wealthy. He had a lot of property, a huge family, and basically in every way was blessed by God. God was really watching out for Job. And so we kind of, at the beginning here, we have the Satan and God are talking, and God, he kind of boasts about Job. He kind of says, yeah, you want to know a really good guy? Let me show you this guy named Job. He wanted the Satan to recognize how good Job was. Now you'll notice I said the Satan, right? Did anybody pick up on that? There's a reason I use that terminology, because now not all translations use this, but in the book of Job, some translations use the term the Satan because this was not a proper name. It actually translates to the adversary or the accuser. And kind of the way it's interpreted or stated was this was kind of a position of kind of a prosecuting attorney challenging Job's righteousness, right? Because the Satan says, well, yeah, he's a good guy. Yeah, he worships you. Yeah, he trusts you. You've given him no reason not to. You have blessed this guy so much, he has no other reason than to worship you, to bless you, to thank you for everything he has. And God says, oh, no, you don't get it. He really is a good guy. And so the Satan is given authority to challenge Job, to give him some hurdles, some stumbling blocks, if you will. First, possessions. Possessions start disappearing. There's storms. There's death of his cattle and livestock. Then family. There's family members die. Things are taken away from Job. And then finally his health. He's covered in boils and scabs. Job gets a pretty rough deal, honestly. Now, you may say, now wait a second. This is about coping with evil, and that wasn't evil. God was there. You're right. However, it's important to know, Job didn't know that. Job had no way of knowing that this was a test for him that was authorized by God. Job did not, now acknowledge, understand, we're in chapter 1 when all this stuff starts happening. It's not until chapter 38 of Job that it even mentions God talking to Job. So understand, Job had no way of knowing that this was a test. He just thought, well, evil is coming down on me. I had goodness come down on me before. Now this is evil. And he had a choice on how to deal with it. So we need to acknowledge how Job handled these struggles, these issues, these problems that he had, right? We look at how he dealt with it all. How he responded to what he thought was evil. Now, as Greg acknowledged, the ripping of the clothes, the shaving of the head, okay, you don't have to use that if you're dealing with evil or if you're struggling with anything. You don't have to do that, but, you do you, whatever you feel like. But I think we do need to acknowledge that, what did Job say at the last that Greg read? He bent down to worship God. He acknowledged God's sovereignty. He acknowledged God's authority. Job knew everything that he had was because of God. And he basically said, if I can worship God when things are good, I have to worship God when things are bad. I can't just be happy and worshiping God. I have to be sad. And yes, worship God. And despite the encouragement from his friends and even his wife, Job would not blame God. In fact, does anybody who read the book of Job tell me what his wife actually said? It was pretty rough. Curse God and die. I mean, even his wife was not supporting him. Now, was Job upset? Was Job frustrated? Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with being upset. There's nothing wrong with being frustrated. But blaming God? No. He never blamed God for this. And we all have a choice to make when it comes to issues, to problems, to challenges in our lives. And again, I want to stop briefly here and acknowledge the fact that we all go through struggles in life, don't we? And these all need to be acknowledged and recognized. Now, some may feel like, well, that other person has bigger problems than I do, so it doesn't seem right for me to, acknowledge mine, to ask God for help through these. But I will tell you, the difference is your issues are your issues, right? They are the ones that you are dealing with. God does not see our issues, our problems at different levels. All God sees as are problems that one of their children are going through. And they're never going to say, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to deal with this problem first for them. You just wait. At no time does God ever say, wait, as I deal with your problems or I deal with somebody else's problems. God is always there in all of our issues, our struggles. And we can try to deal with it on our own, or we can choose to rely on God. That's really our two options, isn't it? So I do want to ask, I know Laura does, but has anybody else ever heard of a singer-songwriter by the name of Avril Lavigne? Nope. All right. Wow, we are of a different generation, aren't we? Yeah, not yet. But Avril became big in the early 2000s. And she was dealing with some health issues and was actually bedridden for 5 months. And for a while, they had no idea what was going on. All they knew was there was a lot of health issues. There was a lot of struggles during that. And it turned out it was actually Lyme disease. And she has really worked hard to get this acknowledged because so many people were like her, or still are like her. They're misdiagnosed, or they don't even know that they have it, type of thing. So it's something that needs to be acknowledged. But she drew on this to write this song called Head Above Water. Now, let's hit it. Maybe.
I gotta keep the calm before the storm. I don't want less, I don't want more. Must bar the windows and the doors to keep me safe, to keep me warm. Yeah, my life is what I'm fighting for. Can't part the sea, can't reach the shore. And my voice becomes the driving force. I won't let this pull me overboard. God, keep my head above water, don't let me drown. It gets harder, I'll meet you there at the altar as I fall down to my knees. Don't let me drown, drown, drown. Don't let me drown. So pull me up from down below, 'cause I'm underneath the undertow. Come dry me off and hold me close. I need you now, I need you most. God, keep my head above water, don't let me drown. It gets harder, I'll meet you there at the altar as I fall down to my knees. Don't let me drown, drown, drown. Don't let me drown. Don't let me drown, drown, drown. And keep my head above water, above water. And I can't see in the stormy weather. I can't seem to keep it all together. And I can't swim in the ocean like this forever. And I can't breathe. God, keep my head above water. I lose my breath at the bottom. Come rescue me. I'll be waiting. I'm too young to fall asleep. So God, keep my head above water. Don't let me drown. It gets harder, I'll meet you there at the altar as I fall down to my knees. Don't let me drown. Don't let me drown. Don't let me drown. And keep my head above water, above water.
So Apple wrote this song, and I think it can certainly speak for all of us. Whether you define illness or other situations as evil, we can all look to situations where we feel like we have no control, we have no power, when we're brought down to our knees, when we're struggling against the odds, where we feel overwhelmed. And honestly, we can let it overcome us, or we can turn to God. Evil, in whatever form it takes, is powerful, but God is more powerful. God calms our spirits. I got to keep the calm before the storm. God keeps us safe. To keep me safe, to keep me warm. Evil can try to drown us, but God rescues us. God, keep my head above water. Don't let me drown. It gets harder. God can pull us up no matter how far the darkness drags us down, because I'm underneath the undertow. But we have to acknowledge, we have to humbly request God's presence and acknowledge our limitations. As I fall down to my knees, I'll meet you at the altar. And this is exactly what Job does too, isn't it? Exactly what Job does too. Job acknowledged, I have no power. I have no control. But I know who does. I know God has control over everything. I will acknowledge, I will worship, I will bow down before God. It's true, we don't always know God's plan. In fact, very often we have no idea what God's plan is for us. But we have to trust in God. And I can't see in the stormy weather. And I will tell you that we have an extra bonus. Job, as I said before, really didn't have any other supporters other than God. And yet we have more. Not only did Job have God loving him and watching over him, just like we do, but we also have friends and family within the church. So how do we cope with anything in life? We have to trust in God. Throughout Scripture, people relied on God. Even Jesus. It talks about Jesus bowing down in worship and acknowledgement of the sovereignty and the power of God. And it's not always easy. I get that. I can't imagine going through what Job went through. I honestly don't know how I would respond. But God will keep your head above water. God will keep you from drowning. God will watch over you always. And we have a choice. Every situation, every problem, every struggle we have a choice. We can choose to go through it with God or without God. That's our options. That's it. And quite honestly, I don't know why you would go through it without God. Even if you don't understand, even if you don't know why, to me it seems like really the only option. Turn to God when you're struggling. Which is better, with God or without? So my challenge for this week is a really, really simple one. Trust in God. Now, easy to say. Again, I understand that. Harder to do. But really, it's your only option. Let's bow our heads.